I'm here with Henrik of Screamer to talk about the upcoming new album, Kingmaker, out January 13th on Steam Hammer. Welcome to the channel. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well today. I'm stoked about this interview, and heavy metal is life.
And I'm sure you're stoked about the album.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's been a long work in progress with this album, and we are so stoked to finally get it out for everyone to get to listen to it.
So, fifth album, what sets Kingmaker apart when you look at the previous records and you look at the final product that Kingmaker offers?
I would say, like, now we finally boiled down everything to the essence, like what we're about. We've been doing basically the same thing since the start, but now we have a clear aim and the know-how to get it done in the way that we want to present it. I think that's the big difference. I think is we found what we boiled it down on Highway of Heroes, but here it's like, okay, we've landed in this. Now we know where we're at with everything. And I think we've progressed a lot as songwriters, and
that progression that you're mentioning, has that have an impact on the creative process when it comes to thinking about a record, designing a record, approaching the creation of the record?
Yeah, definitely. When we started out, me and Daya went down and laid down the foundations for like 5 songs in early. What year is it now? It's 2022. So in early 2021, we went down, and like obviously Dan had a lot of riffs, but then we had a lot of ideas about vibes for songs that we wanted to have to make an album interesting to listen to. We are not a speed metal band. We do not only play super fast songs. We wanted to make a dynamic, hard rocking heavy metal album, as we think we've been doing all the time. But now perhaps we were really focused about it from the start. So I think that was, in a way, we wrote everything remotely. Like me and Dayan lives here in the area of the band's hometown, but we're all spread out these days over the country. And that with the pandemic, we could actually focus on an entirely new level, actually not spending 3 days, 30 hours here down in our recording studio. Instead, we could send things back and forth, take a day or two to reflect and actually be constructive and do what's best for the songs instead of just being a hothead. I want my idea. So I think that was the biggest thing that changed doing Kingmaker. Also, the tools we got from Gustav Hjortsjö, who produced Highway of Heroes. It was sadly not available. It was tied up in other projects for Kingmaker, but the tools we got from him, and the approach was like, yeah, we still want to have external input on what we're doing. So we went to Gothenburg to Jacob Herman at Top Floor Studios and got even more tools on how to approach songwriting. So I think we're getting there. We know what we're doing these days, at least.
When you say you're getting there, are you still searching for what the sound of Screamer is going to be, or do you feel like you found the sound? Now it's just about fine-tuning the approach?
Yeah, no, we found what we are. I think we did that already, perhaps on Hell Machine. As an album, it's not representative of what we do with Kingmaker, but that's when Andreas, our singer, came into the band, and like Screamer Mark II started. Like, we know what we're doing, but fine-tuning all of those details into like getting the songs to have everything that we want a Screamer song to have, and be able to learning to present it the way that we want it presented, instead of cutting corners and compromising. This time we didn't compromise, and we will not compromise on production or who we're working with going from here. So we have our sound, but how to get a new album done. Now we know we have a few more details, then we know exactly how it's going to be for the next 5 records.
Listening to this album, the first thing that I noticed was that it has a very simple format. I'm not saying the album is simple. I'm saying it feels simple to the listener because it's a record that's easy to engage with and easy to stay engaged with. Now, is this a result of the track listing and the overall design of the record, or is this a result of the sound that you created for this album?
I think we had that approach when we started, right? And we wanted all the vibes to get in there. Wanted a dynamic record. We don't just want to play. You listen to the album, say "Burn It Down," for instance. That's a speed metal banger, but we don't want to do 10 speed metal songs, speed-ish metal songs. You got to get the fist going in the air with Kingmaker, and then you go at hot rocking with Rise Above, and then you take a step back, catch your breath, and get into a different vibe with, say, The Traveler, and then kick things off again with Hellfire. That's what we want to do, because bit of a roller coaster with everything, and that was the most important part, I think, about this album, that we actually got all the elements that we think a record needs, because we don't want to release a record with the same song 10 times. And where did we start with this? So that's, yeah. So it's not about the production per se about the album. It was an actual thought. It's like more like vibes that we wanted, the different vibes that we feel like we want and what we look for in a heavy metal record.
So let me ask you this: when you guys are creating the songs, because you create the songs before you create the album, do you already have in your mind the vision of what the full record is? So you're looking for certain tracks that, hey, you know what? We've done 2 songs that sound like this. We need this one that kind of has a different vibe. Is that how you approach it?
Sometimes, especially when you start writing for an album, and if you're heavily influenced by something at that point, you end up with 4 songs in the same BPMs, same vibe, and then it's like, nope. We're cutting those 3 songs. This one is the best, so we're keeping that. Not necessarily cutting out the riffs that might be good in another song. We save that for later, or we save that idea for later. And then when we puzzling everything together, it's like, yeah, but this works here or not. Actually, we have a second good song out of this here as well, because yeah, that's the starting with songwriting. It's like it can be all over the place, or it's going to be 5 songs that sound just exactly the same, and that's the hard part. It can take a month or 2 to get over that bump, but when you're over it and creativity starts flowing, and then it's like, okay, we got this.
You got it. I have to ask you a question about sound, specifically for those coming into this album not knowing what Screamer delivers. You mentioned speed metal. I felt like this album had obviously like new wave of British heavy metal sound to it. That classic heavy metal sound was there. There were some glam elements, specifically when it comes to the synths and the keyboards. I want to talk a little bit more about that later. And then obviously rock and roll, like you call it speed metal. I call it like Motorhead riffing. There's a lot of Motorhead riffing on this album.
I called one song speed metal-ish, Burn It Down, because we consider ourselves like we don't say that we are a new wave of traditional heavy metal band. From the start with Screamer, in Sweden we say hård rock. It's hard rock, but you know, Iron Maiden is hard rock. At the Gates is Swedish hård rock, even though it's death metal. It's more like for the metal kind of music. So we always said that we are hård rock, hard rock, That doesn't mean that we're like mid-80s Def Leppard or
Skid Row.
No, but the first two Skid Row albums, that energy on those albums, that's something we can like proudly say like, yeah, we love that. But we are not a sleaze outfit. We are, as you say, more Motorhead rock and roll, but we are also twin lead addicts. Like we need a lot of melody. We're these days, if you say melodic hard rock, it's very misrepresentative because then you would perhaps not get screamer at all because that's basically AOR. That's not what we're doing. We're doing heavy metal, but we have perhaps a different approach. We don't want to become a tribute band to 80s heavy metal bands. Heavily influenced, obviously, but with the guitar works and everything, we're equally influenced by 90s In Flames, though we do not play that same kind of music, but the influences, everything falls into part with what we're doing. And vibing, as I said before, that's heavy metal is about a vibe for us, at least, what we want to communicate. So that's perhaps the most important thing.
And taking the lead, the twin lead on the guitars, let me ask you this. For an album like this, Kingmakers is very guitar-driven record from start to finish. Now, you can argue some songs, the guitars play a bigger role than others, but it is a very guitar-driven album. Does that have an impact on when it comes to the production behind the album, the mixing, on where you want that guitar sound to be and how you want that guitar sound to come across?
Yeah. Yeah, for some, for like the main rhythm sound, it's very important that it sounds organic, I guess. But like when presentations with solos, it's like John had a lot of ideas. Like for this song, I need this kind of the guitars needs to sound like this to communicate what I'm playing to fit together with the song. And so yeah, I'd say it's very important.
I know exactly what you're talking about because when I was listening to the album, I felt like the mixing or the production, I should say, of certain tracks, as far as the guitar sound is concerned, was very specific to the style of song that you guys had created. So if the song had more of a classic heavy metal vibe, the production behind it also brought a little bit more of that vibe into the forefront. A song like Burn It, it had more of a guitar-driven sound. Motorhead, you call it speedish metal. Yeah. The production behind the guitar sounded slightly different in order for them to have a different touch on the song. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting because some bands would follow the same line all the way across, regardless of where the track is taking you. That's definitely not the approach here.
No, it is not. It's like, well, I'm the drummer, but it's like for the first time I used 6 different snares in the studio, different tunings. That's as well. So never thought about that before, but it all those small details in the production makes for a major difference in the end. That it's kind of like we had like no compromise with this album. It's like we're gonna do it exactly as we want to, and we're gonna get the people that can help us communicate what we want, because doing that ourselves is hard. But when you get people that does this every day for a living in the studio, and it's like, oh, but we want this and we're thinking like this. Okay, I got you guys. I know what you're doing.
Before we talk about the drums, because I definitely want to ask you about the drums on the overall presence of this album, I want to go back to those keyboards that I mentioned earlier. You guys kind of sprinkled them in, some synths, some keys here and there. They're not in the forefront, which I think is something that metal bands are doing a lot these days. They're just pack the keyboards in the forefront and almost drown everything else behind. What was the idea? What was the role from your point of view of what you guys wanted out of the synths and keyboards for this album?
Yeah, I think there's only one. So I think it's Burn It Down does not have any keys at all. But in the general approach for the keys for this album, it's on every other track, but on most tracks, you can't hear them. It's like a math, just filling out and giving simple atmosphere to the song, I guess you could say. And specifically in The Traveler, we had our friend Kyle McNeil, because we'd done that style of song before. We had No Sleep Till Hamilton on our second album, Phoenix. And it's about the same vibe, about the same topic. But then we felt we had a bit of a gloomy, not gloomy, but it's a road song. But then we explained our idea to Kyle, like, we kind of want this because we can do this as a classic rock song without any keys or synthesizers or whatever. But we also want it to be there, lurking in the background, and then presenting itself all the way out in the chorus to give that super freedom feeling for the highway that you need. That was actually, we tried it out on the previous album, but this time we had like a clear idea since we landed we felt comfortable doing it. It's the same thing with Chasing the Rainbow. My old drum teacher from junior high is a really good musician in general. So like, we have this idea for this song, and so he played the Hammond, his actual Hammond, through Leslie in his studio and sent it to us. Like, yeah, exactly. Because then it lifts up what would be a straightforward heavy metal song. All of a sudden, you get like more depth to the music itself, and I think it's the biggest and best lesson we learned on this album, is that we should not be afraid of it, but we do not ever want it to be in the front, because it is still about the guitars, about the vocals in Screamer. We're not gonna go full AOR on anyone, I promise.
You know, the interesting thing about the keys on this record is that I first listened to the album in my car, and I can tell you some songs, I swear to God, there was no keys in it. And then when I listened to the album on my headphones, I discovered the keys, and I thought, this is brilliant, because depending on where you're listening to, the experience is going to be completely different.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with the percussion as well, with the eggs, shakers, and tambourines. You can't hear them if you don't listen to them, but when you hear them, you can't unhear them. It's all, we learned a lot about how we want it to be presented. That's for sure.
When it comes to the drums, you said that you took some liberties, let's call it that way. You added a few elements when it came to this album. Where do you see your role as a drummer when it comes to the Screamer sound?
Basically just the backbone was my approach before, but on this album we actually had a drum producer, and it forced me way out of my comfort zone. It's like, no, but Henrik, you got to think like this. You have to do this fill here. You have to think drum roll or drum fill here. You have to think about, you're actually presenting like the transition in the song. It's like, you're presenting, here comes the chorus, and you need to and it's like, how do you do that? Don't you just go from the high to the right? No. You got to think of boom, 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 da, da, da. It's like, oh, it feels so stupid speaking drum on a video. I actually learned that on Highway of Heroes. Gustav, who produced that, was really good with like all the markings, like how I should follow the vocals. But with Jacob, it was the next level. Now you should follow, but Henrik, this is your lead. You're playing lead drums on this part, because it's like, you are the others are playing what they do and singing what they do. But now the drum changes and introduces this next part of the song, and that was a lot of fun and a very new experience to me, at least.
Do you have a favorite song drum-wise on this record that you have a blast playing, and maybe above all others? Or let me put it this way, do you prefer the faster stuff, or do you prefer the slower stuff?
I think most fun to play is Fall of a Common Man. I don't know, and it's just basically, but I get the vibe that I love from that song. we rehearsed this weekend because we got to freshen up on our memory on the new songs. And Burn It Down that's the fastest song. It's a whole lot of fun to play, but also Hellfire is a whole bunch of fun to play as well. And then Kingmaker is a whole lot of fun to play as well. And the Traveler that goes boom ba boom boom ba is so much fun to play. It's I don't know. I think I just love playing.
Yeah, I think you love playing all of them actually.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Do you have a big influence when it comes to drums? Who's your so-called mentor, if you will?
I would say number one for me is perhaps Anders Johansson. He played with Hammerfall, Yngwie. Is from Swedish drummers, number one for me. But then I love Dave Holland's drumming and I love Nico McBrain's drumming, but that's like opposite sides of the scale. But then energy-wise, I don't think anyone in the world beats Dave Lombardo. You know, because he communicates with every stroke on his drums. He communicates his vibe and his feeling into the song. And I as a drummer, love that so much more than hearing the fastest or the most technically perfected drum fill or whatever. I'm vibing a lot with drums. That's basically it. If I listen to a metal concert, and obviously I look a lot at the drummer, but in his playing he has to communicate the heavy music to me and sit there and you know. So I guess that's Anders Johansson, Nick McBrain, Dave Lombardo. I think that's everything. I think Nico is perhaps a bit way too much out there with everything, but no one else in the world can play drums for Iron Maiden or do what he does. Obviously, they can replicate it, but they can't do what he does. Then Anders Johansson, solid and great, and a lot of the times very tasteful. And then Lombardo for the energy. Yeah, for sure.
I have to note that you didn't mention Lars from Metallica. So let me ask you this as a drummer: do you think he gets too much hate from fans, or do you think that hate is deserved?
I think it's absolute bullshit bashing on him. Yeah, he hasn't been on top of his games from time to time, and I'm not a huge Metallica fan, but there would be no Metallica without him. They would not be the biggest metal band without him, and he is also vibing. He does his thing. It's not amazing drumming, but it's the best drumming in the world that Metallica could have. I don't. I perhaps rather more see it as a collective. What those guys, that band of friends, what they're doing together. So I'm really tired of the Lars bashing because, yeah, it's not super exciting drumming, but hey, man, they write good songs. They've written good songs for a long time. And obviously, it doesn't matter if he's the best drummer or in the world or not. So yeah, go Lars. I'm on Team Lars.
All right, perfect. One last, yeah, I agree with you. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're the best in the world, as long as you're the best for the band that you're in. I think that's more important. Last question for you about Screamer. What are the plans for 2023 now that the album is coming out at the beginning of 2023?
Yeah, we let the album come out and then we let it marinate for a little bit, and then in April we're heading out on the album release tour in Europe, doing some summer festivals, and then the plan is to cross the pond for North America again, but this time it will be mainly focused on the eastern parts of North America. And that's as far as we are in the planning for now, because we're keeping a few windows open. We have a few perhaps and maybes about things that are not set in stone just yet. So, but it will get busy.
I hope that East Coast US tour includes some East Coast Canadian dates, because I'm in Toronto, so we're very close to New York. I hope you guys don't get scared by the beavers and the mooses. And
Dude, we've been to Toronto, we've been to Canada 4 times. It's home away from home. So I'm guessing Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City will be on there.
Oh, perfect. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on this side of the Atlantic. Henrik, thank you very much for your time, man. All the best during the holiday season, and all the best for you and the guys with the release on January 13th on Steam Hammer, Screamer, Kingmaker. The opening track kicks ass, and that's the title track as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Pedro. It was so much fun talking to you.
Oh, it was a blast. Take care, man. All the best.
Here.